And we're back for episode 3. ProfessorMichaelWelch.com introduces the course, Torture and Human Rights. What we have done in the previous episodes is kind of provided some outlines as to how this course was assembled by way of my background in psychology and sociology, and making a segue into fieldwork. And that's what we're going to do in the next couple of segments. We're going to look at these manuscripts and these articles based on my fieldwork in clandestine detention centers. And I'm drawing specifically on my 2017 project where I was based at the University of Buenos Aires in the Faculty of Law. And I was exploring these former detention centers in Buenos Aires. And just let me say from the outset that in Argentina, during the so-called Dirty War, what we more properly say is the last dictatorship, military dictatorship, between 76 and 83. Thousands upon thousands of civilians were detained and tortured and executed. There's been roughly 500 of those clandestine detention centers recovered in Argentina, nationwide. But in Buenos Aires, they have identified and recovered close to 50 of them. So I spent my time doing field work in many of these detention sites. Sightedness figures prominently in my work. I go to the actual locations, the actual facilities where these atrocities occurred. From there, I moved to Santiago, Chile, where I conducted another round of research on this topic. And then I traveled to Asunción in Paraguay, and then to Montevideo in Uruguay. Now, let me point to the abstract. This is an article that is in the process of being published in the journal Social Justice. In the aftermath of the 1973 coup, Chilean intelligence agents moved to develop security network by recruiting other nations, including the United States, and what would become known as Operation Condor. Several dictatorships in the Southern Cone contributed to a centralized computer system and data bank designed to navigate abductions, detention, and torture, and ultimately assassinations. Because other forms of state terror were also unfolding in the 1970s. Not all political violence can be attributed to Operation Condor. I want to make that clear. Because other forms of state terror were also unfolding in the 1970s. Not all political violence can be attributed to Operation Condor. Still, the use of clandestine detention centers became an important tool for interrogation and extermination. Let me pause there. Extermination. One of the quotes that you will hear from time to time in this course is from the philosopher Baudrillard, in which he said, "Forgetting the extermination is part of the extermination." Forgetting the extermination is part of the extermination by both Condor operatives as well as agents involved in related so-called dirty wars. This article that you'll be reading will explain in great detail what we mean by the so-called dirty wars. Since the early 2000s, many of those sites have been recovered by human rights groups, which have converted them into memorial spaces. Through the use of pictures and text, the legacy of Operation Condor has become a cultural vehicle to activate memory for visitors. So we are the visitors. We go to these sites. Many of these sites allow visitors to take photographs. However, They are barred from taking photographs of other visitors. They are permitted to take photographs of the artwork that is on display, of the interior of some of these former military buildings. And that's what we're going to study in this course, is I have compiled a large archive of my field work of the interior as well as the exterior of these former detention centers. Let me repeat that. Through the use of pictures and text, the legacy of Operation Condor has become a cultural vehicle to activate memory for visitors, even in former detention centers that were not specifically used by Condor operatives. So Operation Condor was a subset of these much wider campaigns of military dictatorships. This research examines the afterlives and spatial transitions of numerous sites located in Buenos Aires, Argentina, Santiago, Chile, Asunción, Paraguay, and Montevideo, Uruguay. By doing so, interpretive commentary considers complex matters of memorialization as well as forgetting, amnesia, and denial. Again, forgetting the extermination is part of the extermination. Let's look at some photographs from the field work. When you download this manuscript in a PDF form from the Canvas syllabus website, you will see that I have also uploaded a handful of photographs. So when you read the manuscript, you will be able to follow the captions that will simply instruct the editor to put image number 1 in this particular passage of the manuscript. So I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. These are the photographs you're going to see attached or uploaded onto the page for the website. And this is Buenos Aires. This is ESMA, E-S-M-A, ESMA. This is the former Naval Training Academy that was repurposed during the last dictatorship as a detention, torture, and extermination center. And this has now been recovered by human rights organizers, and the city of Buenos Aires provided the legal foundation for recovering this military compound, and they repurposed this into a memorial site. So Buenos Aires and ESMA, I mention those two parallel locations because I study cities like Buenos Aires, but that provides the context of my urban ethnography of ESMA. And so from there, just a snapshot. We're just giving you a couple of examples. This is Orletti. This is was an automotive repair shop that was repurposed by the last dictatorship in Buenos Aires as a torture site. In the article, Sites of Condor, you'll be reading at length about Orletti. Spent a considerable amount of time at this location as well as many days studying ESMA. We're still in Buenos Aires, and it is here that we see a silhouette assembled on a small hill. And what we're looking at is an overpass. There's a motorway that's actually been constructed over this site. Now, a brief history. This was a detention, torture, and extermination center called Atlético. It was a police station in San Telmo section of Buenos Aires. And it was recovered during the process of building the motorway. And there's a very lengthy and interesting story about this, so I'm not going to I'm not going to close the gap on this. I want to leave it open for you to figure out how this figures into these sites. But it is shaped as a silhouette, as a memorial. And we see that as a common expression of memorialization. And you're also going to read about Chile. This is a poster that was developed by the political activists who were opposed to the Pinochet dictatorship, who is featured in the middle of these pawns of the chessboard, and of course drawing attention to Uncle Sam as a coordinator of sorts in Operation Condor, as well as the overthrow of the Allende presidency by Pinochet. You might hear Pinochet being pronounced Pinochet, very common in North America and Europe, but I will kind of try to stick to the Chilean pronunciation. And this is also in another detention center in Villa Grimaldi. And this is now a park for peace, a memorial site. And this was used, this tower was used as a detention center. You'll read about that. And also in Chile, in Santiago, the football stadium where they play soccer was a detention center. More than 12,000 detainees were processed and held at this location in the early stages of the coup in 1973. We talked about our, I would say, U.S. 9/11, our 9/11, September 11th, and the other 9/11 is in Santiago, is in Chile, which is 1973, September 11th. Just a couple more, and then we're going to move on to a next episode. We are now in Asunción, Paraguay, and this is a former detention center that's open as a memorial site, but just giving us evidence of how these victims were bound and submerged in the bathtub. And Montevideo, beautiful city with a horrible past during the dictatorship. And what we're looking at is Punta Carretas, and that's a former prison holding political prisoners. And it is now a shopping mall. Read about that in the article.